Central Bank Governor Emefiele has revealed that about 1 trillion in the soon-to-be replaced notes had been received through the banking system to be swapped for new notes, which has become effective from January 31st, 2023. Governor of Central Bank made this revelation in Dora, Katsina State, while briefing journalists after I met with President Muhammadu Buhari.
I'm visiting Dara to greet Mr. President and also see him as part of a normal briefing that I normally carry out. The briefing has been overdue, and I thought that he should be briefed about what is happening in Central Bank, what is happening in the economy, and generally recent happenings in the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Nigerian economy.
What is the recent happening?
You know, there are so many things happening. Of course, issues bordering on the new currency and the fact that only yesterday the new currency has now reached the banks, and that we expect that the banks will begin to distribute those currencies to the members of the public who are their customers, and primarily to assure the president that things are going on well about the currency, as well as issues bordering on the cashless policy that we recently introduced. The Senate of the Federal Republic's National Assembly, the legislative arm of the government, and from time to time we brief them about what is happening, about our policies, and I'm aware that they have asked for some briefings, and we will brief them. But I think it's important for me to say that the cashless policy started in 2012, okay? But at almost 3 to 4 occasions, we've had to step down the policy because we felt that there is a need for us to prepare ourselves and deepen our payment system infrastructure in Nigeria. Between 2012 and now 2022, almost or about 10 years, we believe that a lot of electronic channels have been put in place that would aid people in conducting banking and financial services transactions in Nigeria. We've heard about people talking about some of the people in our rural areas. And the truth is that even online banking, as I was coming out to Dara, I saw a kiosk that has super agents today. Because of the way we felt that there is a need for us to deepen payment system infrastructure, we have 1.4 million super agents that are in all over the country, different parts of the country, all local governments, all villages in this country. And I have told my colleagues, I'm sure some of their names are already on the CBN website, and we will publish all the names of all the super agents.
The House of Representatives has asked the Central Bank of Nigeria to halt forthwith the cash withdrawal limits policy expected to commence on the 9th of January 2023. In response to public outcry, the resolution was passed equal to the adoption of a motion on the need for Central Bank of Nigeria to rescind its decision on reverse cash withdrawal limits sponsored by Honorable Aliyu Magaji. Several lawmakers warned that the policy will have serious consequences and adverse effect on businesses and Nigerians who have no access to the banking system. But the minority leader under the Numelu says the policy will check crimes as funds will now be tracked through the banking system. He said, though the timing might be wrong, but the country will benefit from it. Consequently, the House summoned the governor of CBN, Governor Emefiele, to come and explain the policy to the Parliament. Okay, Ayo, your take on all of this.
All right. We expected this to happen following the circular on Tuesday by the Central Bank of Nigeria on the limits on cash withdrawals per week for individuals and businesses, and also the ATM limit or the amount of money that you would get from the ATM. We have had widespread reactions, and analysts, business analysts, economists have come out to respond to this, and of course the House of Representatives has also responded to this with side by side on the same day yesterday, the CBN governor going to pay, as he said in that video, the president a courtesy visit and also to brief him on this new policy. So let's take what Honorable Aliyu Magaji presented before the House, some of his concerns that he's raised based on the new policy. First of all, you must remember that on Tuesday, the CBN mentioned that from the 9th of January 2023, individuals would only be able to withdraw 100,000 naira maximum each week, except in extenuating circumstances, which should come only once a month. And for firms, it would be 500,000 naira. First, he cited the fact that Nigeria is an SME-driven economy. And these SMEs transact significantly in cash. So this will adversely affect this part of the economy. The second part, of course, consequently, is that when cash naira is scarce, then they might resort to other payments, cash payment options like dollars, which would then perhaps weaken the naira, and that's an adverse effect of what the CBN is trying to achieve. The third thing he mentioned was that it is important to note that there are many unbanked rural dwellers in Nigeria, and this hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been fully or comprehensively addressed. Very important to take note of. He also talked about the fact that we haven't developed in the sophisticated technology required for a cashless society that the CBN governor is pushing for. Finally, he talked about the lack of consultation. We brought this up earlier when this news broke, that it was important to understand how far or how wide the CBN consulted before taking on this new policy or passing on this new policy. Very important points that the Honourable mentioned. Now, going back to the minority leader who spoke against the motion, he said that it was like the report suggests it was good policy but bad timing, saying that it would curb kidnapping, banditry. However, the argument has also come up that kidnappers would then also be asking for other sources of cash. And then it puts the pressure, unfortunately, on families who are affected by kidnappers or by bandits to look for other sources of cash, because whatever way they want to be able to, to sort out their family members who are in captivity. Again, just going back to the CBN governor after after the meeting with the president, saying that they might review the withdrawal limit. However, they're not going back on the policy. It's important to mention again, to reiterate the other factors around this. I understand that as he mentioned, since 2012, they've tried to make Nigeria a cashless economy with a number of policies. However, it has been at different points been postponed. At what point are we going to fully achieve this nation being cashless? The truth is that the future of money is digital. We have to embrace that. We have to understand that. However, we must also talk about the timing and the fact that, unfortunately, a number of Nigerians will be excluded if this policy takes effect on the 9th of January 2023. The reality are not the people that live in Lekki or the people that live in urban areas. That's not the reality of majority of Nigerians. Majority of Nigerians are still largely unbanked. Yes, we have 1.4 million agent bankers around the country, but there's still a large dependence on cash. Sensitization is important. Helping people understand the importance and providing infrastructure to accommodate going digital.
Dr. Bati?
Okay, what are the issues involved in this matter? In my view, the issues are as follows. Number one, October 26, November, and all of that, the CBN of Nigeria said it was going to redesign certain categories of the currency notes, the 200 naira note, the 500 naira note, the 1,000 naira note. Subsequently, the CBN also said it was going to create a situation whereby there will be fewer money in circulation, that it will withdraw money from circulation, because according to the CBN, about 3.2 trillion in circulation, 2.7 trillion of that outside the vaults of the banks, and that will create, or was already creating, distortions within the economy. And then, of course, subsequently, the CBN then came and introduced other policies, saying you can't take more than, if you're an individual, 100,000 out of your account in a week. If you are a corporate establishment, you can't take more than 500,000. Now, it is to be expected that there will be reactions to that. And Nigerians have reacted from different angles, criticizing that. The most recent reaction coming from the National Assembly, particularly the House of Representatives, in a motion of urgent national importance, proposed by Honorable Aliyu Magaji to the effect that, look, small businesses will be affected. So it will appear that, it's not just the Nigerian people who have reacted to the policies introduced by the CBN, but also the representatives of the people in both the red and green chambers. So, but there were some of them, like Honorable Ndudi Elumelu, who supported the CBN and who said, look, this will check crimes. This would enable the government to track funds within the system. So it seems to me that the CBN governor's trip to Daura, the president's hometown, provided him an opportunity to respond to some of the reactions to the recent policies on the monetary side. So let us evaluate those reactions. Number one, he said that the CBN is not going to be rigid with regard to the implementation of this policy. He said the CBN will continue to monitor how these policies play out, and that the CBN will listen to the concerns of the Nigerian people. I think that that's a very important takeaway for me and maybe for other people, and that the CBN intends to accommodate the concerns of other Nigerians. So in other words, the CBN governor is telling us that this is not a rigid policy. There will be reviews if the need arises. And so I hope that the CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, is very sincere in that regard, because people have expressed their concerns, and that he will take those concerns along with him in implementing. Secondly, he said there is no objection on the part of the CBN to the Senate's concerns that has raised. Well, what we know is that the House of Representatives has now summoned the CBN governor to appear before the House of Representatives next Thursday to come and explain the policy and to address the concerns that I've expressed. If we go by what Godwin Emefiele said in Daura, it will appear that he is willing to go there to brief the National Assembly and to carry them along. But the question to ask is, why are they being briefed after the fact? If government is a composite arrangement, and the CBN, the executive arm of government, is going to adopt a policy, shouldn't the legislators have been briefed ahead? So this is why we talk about lack of synergy among government departments within the government and all of that. So, but I hope next Thursday, Godwin Emefiele will appear before the National Assembly. Although, there's always that problem about the legislature summoning members of the executive, and they will turn around and say, oh, I didn't get the president's clearance to appear before the National Assembly. I hope that will not happen in this case, because the representatives of the people in the National Assembly, they have the right to know, so that they will know what to say. Even if some of them are already supporting the CBN's policy, I think that engagement is important. But I think it's coming late. It should have been done before now. Now, the CBN governor in Daura, Katsina State, also tried to respond to other concerns that have been raised by the public. And he made it clear that the cashless policy, which is the objective of the CBN, has been in place since 2012. And that the reason that the CBN has not gone the whole hog is because they wanted to build critical infrastructure. And in that regard, he made the point that to the concern of persons who say, look, rural areas, the population in the rural areas will be disadvantaged, that in fact, they have up to 1.4 million banking agents who can, attend to the needs of people in the rural areas. Well, that may have to be fact-checked. Because it's not enough for the CBN governor to just say, oh, I was in Katsina, I saw some banking agents. We have 1.4 million. Okay, can you verify that those 1.5 million banking agents in rural areas actually exist? That is the question in that regard. Then he made another point that banks have taken delivery of the new notes and they will start dispensing them very soon. I thought that was an interesting point that he made. Interesting to the extent that, look, the launch of the new notes, the unveiling of the new notes was originally scheduled for December 15. But they said they were ready. And they asked the president to go ahead and unveil the new notes. Since they did it in more than a week ago, I have not seen any new note. 200 naira, 1,000 naira, 500 naira. I don't know whether anybody has seen those new notes. And is there any guarantee that when we go to the banks, we will see those new notes? Or when we go to the ATM machines, we will see those automated teller machines, we will see those new notes. I can bet that many Nigerians will end up seeing those new notes at event centers, at parties, whereby those new notes will have been diverted. And I hope that does not happen. So, but the CBN governor says they will be monitoring. They will be regulating. The biggest challenge that many of our regulatory agencies have had in this country is a failure of monitoring. And I hope that Godwin Emefiele will expect that we will hold him to account if there's failure of monitoring. I want to go to my bank and be given new notes. I don't want to go to an event center where somebody is getting married or somebody is having a social event, and that is where I will get the new notes. I hope Emefiele himself has seen those new notes and that is in possession of them. But let them make those new notes available in the banking house.
Okay, so real quickly, I think the most important topic here that we've not looked at is inflation. Why is the CBN doing all of this? What was the initial argument? The initial argument was the fact that inflation was going up. Now we're pegged at over 20%. How is it going to reduce inflation? Number one thing it has constantly done is to increase interest rates, which we've seen over time to fight inflation. But some people will argue with the CBN that most of the inflation we have here is due to legacy problems, the fact that there are no good roads to transport commodities and the likes, and all of that. So it's constantly pushed up interest rates. Another thing it's trying to do is to get money out of circulation. Sort of like take the oxygen out of people that store money. 3.2 trillion in circulation, 2.7 trillion under the votes of people. And we saw it was indicative because when the Naira redesign happened, we saw that those monies were stashed away in people's homes. There's something called the velocity of money. It wasn't coming back. Money is supposed to have a velocity, so that's not coming back. The third attempt the CBN is doing is to try to, de-emphasize cash. Initially, hitherto, it's got a CBN policy since 2012, cashless policy. In fact, that policy started with giving people incentives by using their ATM cards and using digital transaction. I remember when the policy started, I used to use my POS card a lot, my ATM card to pay at POS, and I got incentives. But now it's transited into so many things, and many infrastructure has been built. When you look at the arguments, Nigeria does not have, the fillip in the argument to say that infrastructure for digital payment has not been built. Go and check Nigeria's digital tech ecosystem. It's been one of the fastest growing in the digital space. Nigeria is about the only country in Africa that officially has tech unicorns in the payment space. Flutterwave is worth over $1 billion US, and there are many payment companies. There's Paga, there's mobile money payments, there's all of that. And Nigeria has grown at an astronomical pace. And for those that say the village and rural dwellers, heck yeah, there's USSD, which I'm beginning to see a trend that in most of the marketplace, interior marketplaces, people know things like *73, *999, or something. And they make their banking transactions. And for those that want to even lodge money in their accounts, they don't go to banks. Year on year, banks have been shutting down branches in remote areas. I keep telling the analogy how my village doesn't even have a bank. It's not have a bank for so many years. POS operators are filled in that spot. And constantly, they've helped to make that linkage between the banks and the people. I think the main challenge should be, and what Nigerians should look out for in all of this, is the fact that after all of this CBN has done, if inflation doesn't come down, then we have a right to shout. But concerning all of this, there are measures put in place. There are alternatives. There's e-Naira. Let's not forget the fact that a lot of Nigerians are already adopting digital currencies big time. Nigerians are one of the biggest markets on crypto and the likes. So people are already using these alternatives, and it's still bulk of Nigerians. You might say, okay, they are not in the rural areas. But with all of this, if inflation doesn't come down, then we can start this again and say the CBN, then all the measures you put in place didn't work. But if this is really about inflation and inflation coming down, let's give it a couple of months and see if it will have any effect on inflation. Then if it doesn't happen, then we'll also look at the legacy problems and say, okay, something is really wrong here. But I think, well on point, the caveats were given. The limits, if you want to exceed the limits, then you pay a certain tax, to be able to disincentivize the use of money. I think those things are crystal clear. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabor, says the armed forces will take a non-partisan stance in the run-up to the 2023 general elections. Irabor said this while featuring at a weekly briefing organized by the Presidential Communication Team at the Presidential Villa. I mean, a lot to talk as regards.
For the 2023 general elections, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Irabor, says the armed forces has put in place contingency plans to facilitate the smooth conduct of the elections in conjunction with other security agencies and stakeholders. Irabor says the military will remain neutral and assist the police in monitoring and securing the process.
There will always be pressure from all quarters, wanting to induce security forces, not just the military, security forces, the police. That's what criminal enterprise is all about. That is what something that is wrong is all about. But what makes it different is the professional approach to dealing with those issues, and that's what the military is attempted to do. Now, the reason why we have wrapped up our training in that regard, sensitization, a lot of engagement across the formations and units have been undertaken.
Speaking on the ongoing war against terrorism and insurgency, General Irabor says the Nigerian armed forces have recorded unprecedented achievements through enhanced force structure, technology, conduct of kinetic and non-kinetic operations, and procurement of new platforms. Some of the achievements include over 300,000 hostages who have been freed from captivity.
To be able to get to where we are within the Northwest, we have to also, enhance the force structure to look at the OBA, that is order about to then reshape it, restructure it, which has helped us to make improvement. And of course, we also leverage on technology as part of the assets that the federal government, made available to us. We've been able to get a few, technology-enabled platforms that has given us greater efficiency in our operations. And of course, enhancing the conduct of kinetic operations, employment of non-kinetic measures also, amongst other strategies that we employ. Yes, please. And then for that reason, over 362 bandits have been neutralized, recovered over 156 AK-47 rifles, and a great number of cache of...
General Irabor says the military personnel are being trained to be more professional, while rules of engagement before, during, and after the elections have been codified and distributed to those involved.
Let's talk about Ayo.
Yes, his General Lucky Irabor, the Chief of Defense Staff, they're re-echoing what the president said last week when he said that the military should effectively take their hands off the elections and just stay within the ambit of their work, of their duties. In speaking to the 61st session of the ministerial briefing yesterday, he had highlighted the fact that they were going to be neutral. And taking it back to the last general election in 2019, where the military was accused of being partisan or interfering in election processes. Very famously, Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State had come out to say that they had interfered in Rivers State and in some states in the Niger Delta. In fact, there was a global concern with the UK leading that, saying that they were quite concerned about how militarized the 2019 election was, with the deployment of troops, surveillance, and perhaps in some states in the country, intimidation, which the army had refuted, saying that they were constitutionally, there was a constitutional provision for them to provide monitoring and oversight of elections in Nigeria. The first thing I'd say is that election is not war. And we must come to a point in our nation where we are able to have free, fair and credible elections without the fear of repercussion if you do not support a particular party, especially from our armed forces and the military. It's also important to note that, analysts have observed saying that this is the first election in the Fourth Republic where we do not have a frontliner who is a former military officer. And perhaps the interest in this case would mean that there would be reduced interference by the military because they can now really play that role of monitoring and securing the lives and property. Well, that's the police's job, but the borders of Nigeria, providing extra support in security. I'm glad that he's come out to say it. It's a consistent message that shouldn't just be from the top, but cascaded down to every military officer. And we must see the evidence of this in the coming days and weeks leading to the 2023 general elections, so that what General Lucky Rabo is saying is not just talk, but there's action, and it's backed up by seeing the military actually taking their role in the next elections. Again, I'll reiterate this: election is not war. Nigerians should not be afraid of their rights being violated by any arm of security agencies.
Dr. Bassey?
Okay, what are some of the points that General Lucky Rabo, Chief of Defense Staff of Nigeria, tried to make yesterday? First, that security, the military of Nigeria, that they are constantly under pressure from all sides, not to be neutral, to intervene in the process. And they try to reassure Nigerians that Nigerians can trust the military under his leadership to maintain a complete position of neutrality and professionalism. And the rules and guidelines with regard to professionalism have been codified and taken all the way down the line. He also tried to advertise the achievements of the Nigerian military, what they have done with regard to checking insurgency, banditry, how they have helped to rescue up to about 300,000 persons from the snares, from the captivity of kidnappers, and how the same military has also helped the Nigerian government in recent times to check the menace of crude oil theft. And on this program this week, we've been addressing crude oil theft and, the achievements that have been made to increase crude oil production from 1 million barrels per day in July after Shell returned to the Forcados terminal to about 1.59 million barrels per day, as reported by Balawunti of the upstream investment sector. So, in other words, you can't argue with him in that regard. The other issue that he talked about is that the recent report, which we discussed yesterday, about the military aiding and abetting abortion of women in the northeastern region. He said, in fact, it was so preposterous, so absurd, that even when there were inquiries by the international medium that pushed that story, he didn't even attend to it, because abortion is not part of the mandate of the Nigerian military. And I guess he's right in that regard. He, however, admitted that there are saboteurs, there are bad eggs within the Nigerian military who try to compromise the mandate of the military. But I wanted to assure all Nigerians, that this is a professional army that Nigerians can trust, and that with regard to elections, they will be completely neutral. Now, which leads me to the basic points. The basic point is that the mandate of the Nigerian military is defined in sections 217 and 218 of the 1999 Constitution. The Nigerian military, yes, reports directly to the President of Nigeria. And the powers of the Nigerian President with regard to the deployment of the military are defined in section 218, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution. Under 217, section 217, the job of the Nigerian military is to protect Nigeria from external aggression and to protect the integrity, the sovereignty of Nigeria, even internally. However, in section 2181, we're told that they can be deployed in aid of civil authorities, that is the police. But the point that General Irabo was pointing out about their role in elections. This has been a matter of controversy. Should Nigeria have soldiers taking part in elections? Because in the past, part of our concern had been that electoral processes in Nigeria are over-militarized. And ahead of 2023 election, there are groups that are saying, we don't want a military election. This was a major issue in Buhari versus Obasanjo. It's a decided case. And there are persons who say that the deployment of the military during elections is unconstitutional and illegal. So that is the residual matter that the Nigerian state has not yet addressed. Because every election cycle, we're told there is a concentric cycle in which the military is embedded. I've written on this in the past, maybe most recently even, saying that, look, when you use the military for police work, because it amounts to using the military for police work, you compromise the integrity of the same civil authorities. But the Constitution says when there is an emergency, you can deploy them in aid of civil authorities. But they have been deployed in circumstances where you cannot even prove that there was an emergency. So that is the issue. But on the points, I think General Irabo made all the right points about neutrality and professionalism. And some people may well address it to mean that, well, it means that nobody should be afraid of any military incursion, because it won't happen. Across West Africa, you have had cases in Mali, you have had cases in Guinea-Conakry, you have had cases in Chad, but we know that going by African Union and ECOWAS protocols, this is unacceptable. And even under international law, military intervention has become unfashionable. And only yesterday we were talking about the citizens of the Reich in Germany, 35 of them who were arrested, led by Henrik XIII, an aristocrat, just to remind the entire world that the military, the place of the military, is constitutionally defined and in a professional manner, and that no soldier should be ambitious. And I'm sure that the Nigerian people are enjoying this democracy, even if it may not have delivered all the dividends. But every day we get entertained. You see that Ademola Adeleke is dancing, or the APC presidential candidate is saying blah, blah, blue, 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 or some other people are doing other things. We like the entertainment, but we want our votes to count.
So one thing is certain, at a time like this in our country, the military plays a very important role in elections. It's not supposed to be the case. But we know why the military now plays a very important role in elections, because it goes back to the military days, and there was a deliberate underfunding of the police. It was like a subjugation of the police over the years during the military era that the police force has not been able to recover from. The biggest mass recruitment in the police force in living memory probably would be the time of Shehu Shagari, where there was an upshoot in the number of police officers. But we have not constantly retooled the police. We have not constantly impacted them. That the military did do while they were around, and that has affected the police force. So most of the might now is in the hands of the military. And we have a military now that is also stressed. We can't deceive ourselves. And that's why kudos to the military and the soldiers everywhere doing great work, saving our lives and all of that. Kudos to them. But as we speak today, because of the massive insecurity in Nigeria, we've got over 15, 16 operations, if my memory serves me, over 10 operations, because these operations some end and some begin. From Hadinkai to the likes and all of that. Overseen by the military. And at the same time, the military still has to defend the territorial integrity of Nigeria as enshrined in Constitution 217. At the same time, they still have to make deployments for elections. So it is not as though the military will have to stay at the polling units. The last elections, we all know, mostly police officers on the polling units. But how effectively can you even deploy a police force that is terribly understaffed for election in a country over 923,000 square kilometers with 774 local government areas? We have seen what we have done in off-cycle elections, where we have to deploy 36,000 police officers to a certain state, which is about close to 10% of the entire police force. And that has not effectively policed the environment. And that's why we have the dilemma where the military will come in. But I'm excited that the military is maintaining that neutrality. We cannot go back to the days of military takeover, like you said rightly, Dr. Bati. We've had blights in Mali, with Bambabaye, in Guinea, and the likes. That doesn't make it tenable. But one thing I think the military should do further that they have not done is to try as much as possible in their operations interface more with the civilians. Because a lot of people have touted them as being high-handed and the likes, and that's why when stories like that come out, the military should introspect and investigate those bad eggs that might have perpetrated these things. Not just say, no, it's never possible, it can't be done. So I think the missing link from the military is that interface even more with the civilians. And I think they have started some of it, especially with journalists and all of that, but they can go one step further in doing that. And also have an effective response team and be at alert, and also work at protecting INEC facilities. We've had too many bunch of INEC facilities across the country, Ebonyi or Ogun and the likes. The military should hold sway. But we all know the first history of the military coming into our political landscape. The military made the first incursion into our political landscape because our politicians couldn't coordinate themselves. Remember those elections where it was copiously reported in the 60s that the citizens were calling on the military officers, say, is this how you're going to be looking while the politicians do and undo? The politicians must watch themselves. And let's build this great nation, because it's indeed a great nation and it's replete with a lot of possibilities.